I would describe clemency, if I could only use one word, as redemption. It's an opportunity where the executive recognizes that a person has changed and really, through executive action, redeems that person out of a life inside a prison into a new life where they can be with their family and they can work and do what we want rehabilitated people to do.
So my name is Centoya Brown-Long. I am 32 years old, and at the age of 16, I was actually told that I'd spend the rest of my life in prison. I was convicted in Tennessee of killing a man that had picked me up for sex, and I was sentenced to 51 years before I ever would receive the possibility of being released. You know, whenever I was sentenced, it felt like I was being told that my life didn't matter, that my life was over, there was nothing left to salvage.
I think if people have heard of me, it's by virtue of my relationship to the Centoya Brown case. My connection to her case was I was working as a prosecutor in the Tennessee Attorney General's office when she submitted her appeal. And it was assigned to me. I was the prosecutor who argued in the appellate courts of Tennessee that her conviction was proper, that she was properly tried as an adult, and that she was properly sentenced to 51 years in prison.
My name is Jason Hernandez. In 1998, I was indicted for conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, and I was sentenced to life without parole plus 320 years. 2013, President Barack Obama granted me clemency, whereby he reduced my life without parole sentence to 20 years. Our prison system right now is based on punishment. It should be based on redemption, acknowledging one has done wrong and why they've done wrong, and reintegrating that person back into society.
You know, once the conviction is imposed and the sentence is handed down, prosecutors tend to move on to the next case. They don't have the luxury of coming back 20 years later and finding out, well, what happened to that person? How are they doing now? Once I started seeing the kind of changes that people can make and making friends with those people, I started seeing justice in a more holistic way.
Whenever you see someone who has been in and out of the system, if you ask me, the question isn't, you know, why do they keep messing up? It's what could we be doing to help this individual more? You know, people can't just be thrown away, and it's not wise to just throw people away. We're capable of growing and becoming better people.
I think that really what's more going with the grain and in line with our best values is accountability that always is seeking to restore that person who has committed the harm, to help them learn, to help them grow, experience transformation, and ultimately move, you know, beyond that and live a better life. And that's really, I think, the only way that they can atone for what they have done. Because, you know, thinking that, you know, that more harm, if we just harm another person, that all of a sudden makes the first harm right or compensates somebody, you know, again, in theory, maybe, but that's just not reality. You know, we're more complex than that. The roots of crime are more complex than that.
Well, your environment is everything. I'd like to believe that if I was born not on the east side of my neighborhood, but on the west side of my neighborhood, that I probably would have been an officer, that I probably would have been involved in politics. But when you look at mass incarceration and the war on drugs and tough policies, minorities have suffered the brunt of that. That we make up nearly 2/3 of the prison population, and in some southern states, that minorities make up over 2/3 of the prison population. Fathers are in prison, the children grow up following their path. That leaves one person in that neighborhood. Those are the mothers.
There are countless women who share, you know, the same stories, similar stories as mine. Many of the women that I knew, a lot of them were involved in abusive situations, reacted out of that abusive situation. You know, these were people's mothers, and they were having to mother from their inside the prison over the prison phone. So it really, it affects far more than just that one individual.
And that you have this collateral impact, these consequences that not only affect that family, but they break down the entire community. Because then you have these big clusters of majority who are black or brown people, where they just can't rebound, where they don't have that support system, where they can't go to their brother or to their sister because they're in prison.
People are kind of figuring out that the war on drugs was wrong-headed from its genesis, and that it was predominantly waged in poor communities, of black and brown people. So it's certainly more palatable to talk about nonviolent drug offenders. That's the low-hanging fruit. But folks who've committed violent crimes, I don't think that when you talk about criminal justice reform that you can exclude them from the equation.
Many times when you get involved in a situation and you react violently, it's not that that's just your first response. It's sometimes people have just been pushed to that point. Here's this one victim that we all know about, but this other individual has circumstances as well, and it looks like they've been a victim of some things that led them to this path of action.
We have this myth that retribution is somehow the key to an experience of justice. And I think that that is a false myth. There's not some magic number of years that if they sit in a prison cell will atone for the harm that they've caused to their victim or their victim's family. I started thinking, well, justice is not a zero-sum game where I can only care about one person, and if I care about rehabilitation, that somehow diminishes my concern for the rights of victims. It's not that way at all. I cultivated an understanding that, even though some of them had committed really, really bad, violent crimes, they had not forfeited their humanity, that there was still so much good and potential there to be worked with, and nurtured and cultivated. Even though they may have committed crimes that we have more of a visceral reaction to, even though we might be more scared of them, and they might be serving longer sentences, we also know that folks age out of even violent crime.
So you could commit a crime when you're 20 and then be in prison for that same crime at the age of 40 or 50, 60, and there is no mechanism that accounts for that. We know that a lot of individuals are serving these excessive sentences. And I think that all those sentences that are not proportionate to the crime should be evaluated. If they show that they're not going to be a threat to society and that their sentence is out of proportion for what their crime, that they should receive clemency. Of course, the president has the authority to release people that are convicted of federal crimes, but mass incarceration is a product of what's going on in our states. But the only people that can release these individuals that are in state prison is the governor.
The judicial process doesn't always allow for compassion. It doesn't always allow for someone to see, okay, I see you as a person, I understand there's some more things we can do. Sometimes statute binds them.
I think that true justice that's not just retribution, but real justice, it is like an umbrella, and compassion is part of that. We need to understand a person's history, the potential that the person has to overcome those bad moments. We need to regard those people with compassion.
Someone may have made a mistake. They may have committed a crime when they were not themselves, when they were overcome with emotion or different circumstances, but they've grown from that, and they've strove to be better. They've bettered themselves. They've really sought forgiveness, and here they are asking for another opportunity to be a productive member of society.
I think that we're really kind of in a crisis where we have got so many people locked up doing such long sentences that it's almost like releasing a pressure valve. That there are certain people that we know have aged out, or they are primary caregivers, and you know, people who have great institutional records 30 years long, that we know if we give them a chance that the likelihood that they're going to reoffend is next to nothing. So it makes sense for the governors to use their clemency power in those cases. The country recognizes that criminal justice reform is needed, that it is coming, and that in situations where, you know, you have good articulable reasons for granting clemency, I don't think governors are going to experience a blowback from that.
I would just say you've got to be bold. You've got to be that leader that does what's right. And it may not always be political, but it's the right thing to do. That's what we need in our country. That's what we need in our state. That's what we need in our leaders.
You know, the one thing about clemency, based on statistics, what it shows, is that an individual that receives clemency is less likely to reoffend. Because I think that it is, you have somebody, whether it's the governor or whether it's the president, telling you that I forgive you. We could sit here and say all the legal terms of what clemency is, but it's about forgiveness, about compassion, about giving somebody a second chance, and realizing that everybody's redeemable, regardless of their color, race, religion, gender, that everybody deserves a second chance.